Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. We will get right into it. On the call today, we actually have Mark with us, and he is one of the co-founders. So any of the difficult questions will go over to Mark. And what I intend to do today is to go over a brief overview of role and how it can work for you. I'm going to keep the webinar quite general in nature. But if this is something that's of interest to you and you want to explore role further, what you can do is jump onto our website, sign up to our trial account, and then I'll be in touch in a couple of weeks, in a couple of days' time, and then we can arrange for a one-on-one demo, and then I can cover off role and how it can specifically work in your situation. Cool. So I'm going to go straight into the demo now, and there will be some time for some questions at the end if you wish. And you can use the chat function, which can be found at the bottom panel under the Q&A section there. Alrighty, so role is very much project-based, and so when you first log into role, you'll land in the projects tab. And projects are assorted into 3 parent statuses. So on the far left-hand side here, you can see that you've got your pipeline, in progress, and completed. Under pipeline, you'll have your unconfirmed work, or in other words, your leads. Under in progress, you've got the work that you've won and are currently working on. And completed, those are the projects that are finished, so pretty self-explanatory. Beneath each parent status, you've got a number of sub-statuses. So for an example, under the pipeline, you've got new leads, prospects, to quote, awaiting decision, on hold, and lost. Each of these sub-statuses can be completely customized to whatever it is that your pipeline or workflow looks like. And you just do that over in the settings area. So if you click on your user icon in the top right-hand corner, go into account settings, and scroll down, you can see that you can delete the statuses that you don't need. You can rename them, reorder them, and add new statuses as needed. And I'd suggest that after you've created a trial account, to go ahead and play around with that. And the idea behind setting up these sub-statuses is that you can set them up so that they're essentially the stages that all of your projects will go through. So if I take this Altair group project as an example, when the lead first comes in, you might have it under new leads. There it is. And then once it's ready to be quoted, you can put it into quote. And then once you've sent out the quote and you're awaiting decision, drag it into awaiting decision. And once you've heard back from your client, whether you've won or lost the job, you can put it into the appropriate pipe. So then this way you can track exactly where each of your projects are at and nothing falls through the cracks. Cool. So now what I'll do with you now is to create a dummy project, and I'll take it through from start to finish. So to create a project, it's just the big green button in the top left-hand corner. You give the project a client or company name. So in this example, let's use ANZ. Boom. Name of the project, I'm just going to call this role webinar. Project description, demo with Simon. And the first thing that I'd suggest you do is to give the project an estimated total value. Now this works best for your fixed fee jobs. And let's say, for an example, it's worth 10 grand. And this is the total amount that you'd be invoicing out to your client. So I'm going to go ahead and save and close. Now, 2 things that I want to point out is that, first of all, ANZ wasn't a company on this particular role account. But as soon as you create a project against a new company, Role is smart enough to create the company at the same time. You just have to remember to sync that particular account back to Xero before you send out any invoices. There we go. And I'm just going to go back into that project. Don't worry too much about this process. This is just a little shortcut. And the second thing I want to point out is that I haven't actually filled out all of the different fields of the project, and that's completely fine. And that's quite nice, especially when the lead first comes in. You might not know everything about the project, and you just want to capture whatever little information you do know. And Role very much accommodates for this. our ethos when we developed Roll was to keep process really light and flexible. So what this means for you is that when you go to create a project, there's no set order that you have to do it in. You can choose to create the project first or company first. Doesn't really matter. Makes it really easy on you. So the next thing I want to cover off is invoicing. So let's just pretend that we've won the job, first of all. So drag and drop into in progress. And the way that we'd manage a job that's worth 10K, and let's say it's a fixed fee job, first of all, I'm just going to start the project to bring it up to the top. There it is. So the way that we'd invoice for these kinds of projects is by what we call progress payments. So if I go into this tab here, I'm going to keep this example really simple. So with a job that's worth 10K, you're probably going to be breaking the invoicing down into a couple of different stages. So in its most simplest form, you'll probably charge a deposit. Let's say it's due immediately. So today's date, 21st of September. Let's say it's for 50%. There's our first progress payment. And then I'm just going to keep this simple and say there's a final payment due at the end of the year, which is when the project is due to finish, for the balance, which is 50%. Now, you could have added as many progress payments as you wanted, but I'm just going to keep this really simple. Progress payments, they accomplish two things. The first thing that it does is that it really streamlines your invoicing process. So what do I mean by this? When it comes time to invoice, all you have to do is jump into the project, go into the project progress payments tab. You can see that sure enough that there's a progress payment with an estimated invoice date of today's date. And then if I click invoice, I've got the option to invoice for, in this case, the full amount of $5,000. And then when I click create invoice, what I'm going to get is an invoice that's pre-populated with all of the relevant information. So you've got the company name here, the project name here, and the single line item of the deposit for 5K. You just have to select the GL account from Xero. So in this case, 200 sales. And then I can just go approve and send, review the email that I'm sending out to my client, and then click send. And that is your invoicing done. So it's really, really easy. The entire process has been streamlined. There's no double entry of data. So that's the first thing that progress payments, that's the first benefit that progress payments offer. The second thing that progress payments do is that it gives you really nice visibility over the business. So what do I mean by this? If I jump into the business metrics tab and I scroll down to the projected earnings graph, hopefully you can see that blue line. That blue line there is predominantly driven by your progress payments. So the way that I'd interpret this graph is that I can see that in the month of September, I'm going to be having, quite the bumper of a month. You're billing about $200,000 worth of projects. So this could be one of two things. Either you've done really well for yourself, so you can pat yourself on the back, or alternatively, it actually could mean that you've got too much work going on. So you might consider bringing on more resources to make sure that deadlines are being met, or alternatively deferring some work into October where it looks a little bit quieter. Regardless of what the actual decision is, Roll just gives you a really nice 6-month forward view as to what your billables are going to be. And the idea behind that is to give you information that's easy to interpret at a glance. Cool. So that is invoicing for you. The next thing that I want to cover off with you is time tracking. And with time tracking in Roll, there's a couple of different methods that you can use. And the important thing to note is that it doesn't matter which method you use because they're all connected. They're not siloed islands of information. The first method would be to open up the project, go into the time tab, and then you can just fill in the details down here. So you've got the date, the number of hours that you use, let's say 5 hours, and then select the applicable charge out rate. Let's say it's the general design rate. And then I'm going to just make a note and say design work, add that, and there's my very first time log. The second method that you can use is the timesheet. To access that, go to the general time tab at the top, go to my timesheet on the left-hand side, and there's my project here. and then you can enter in your time here. This works really well if you want to just enter in your time once at the end of the week, or if you've got lots of different projects that you have to log time for. The third and the final method that you can use is the start-stop timers, which is just found in the top right-hand corner here. I'll say not everybody uses the timers, but the two groups of clients that do, we find that it's clients that are really time conscious, so engineers, consultants, lawyers, or project or companies that could be working on 4 or 5 different projects on any given day. The reason for that is because it's really easy to swap between timer to timer, as you can see. And to start a new timer, just click on the Start New Timer button here at the top right-hand corner, fill in the project details. You can make a manual override if needed. Add your note, your hourly rate, and then click Complete to log the time against the project. Pretty easy. So let's go back into the project and see all of the different time logs. There we go. And if I click on this drop-down bar here, I can see all the time logs that I've entered. And so the reason why you want to be tracking time and roll for a fixed fee job is to give you a view as to how much of your budget you have remaining, and also to see how profitable your projects are. So if I flick that, toggle that over to charge out. So this is under the project info tab. I can see here that I've logged 25 hours of time against a job that's got a budget of $10,000. So at the moment, what Roll is doing is it's taking the 25 hours, multiplying it by the charge out rate that you're charging out to your client. That's accrued a total of about $3,800 worth of budget. And so if the project was to finish today, you'd actually be under budget by about $6,000. If I flick that over to cost, what Roll is doing now is it's taking the same 25 hours, multiplying it by the wage that you're paying Nate and the various employees that have logged time against this project. And that's accrued a total of about $1,250 worth of actual costs to the business. And so if the project was to finish today, you'd actually be pocketing about $9,000. So this is really quite a powerful tool when you're talking from a client-facing perspective or a budget point of view. Flick it over to charge out rate. If you're thinking about internal management and actual bottom line, flick that over to cost. Now, the usual question that I get at this point is, where do I set the charge out rate and the wage for Nate? So if I just save and close, again, just go into the settings area, account settings, there it is. I can scroll down to the hourly rates. And so you can see here, you can add new rates. You can give it the value of time, give the charge out rate a name, and you can also select a GL account that will pop up. This is more applicable for when you're doing time and materials projects. Cool. Awesome. So that's where you set your charge out rate. To set Nate's wage, go into users, click on the various employees, and you can see here that there's an option to select his hourly business cost. So some of our clients, they'll set this as Nate's wage only. Others will go Nate's wage plus allocated overheads. That's more of an accounting business decision for you guys to make. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and save and close. So that's time tracking. The next thing I'll cover off is cost tracking. So if I jump back into this project here, I can see that I can log costs against the business. So these are material costs, and there are 3 instances. The first instance is when it's a part of the fixed fee and you're taking on that cost. So you can choose to allocate a date for the cost. You don't have to. I'm just going to say expense, some kind of material expense. Set the quantity as 1, buy price 1,000. And because it's a part of the fixed fee, it's not a billable cost. And I'm going to add that. If I go into project info, you can see that my costs have increased by $1,000 and my profitability has decreased by 1,000, so that you're pocketing $77.50 instead of $87.50. And there's nothing more you have to do. The second instance is when it's a variation and it's a cost that you're passing on to your customer. And so quantity 1, buy price 1,000. Yes, it's billable. And for now, I'm just going to set the sell price as the same as the buy price. If I click add, go into project info, my costs have decreased back to 0 because you're passing that cost on to your customer. and your profitability is back up to 87.50. And you just have to remember to invoice for that expense item. The third and the final instance is when it's not just the cost that you're passing on to your customer, but you're actually this time selling it to your customer at margin. So you can put the nominal value, or alternatively, you can go 1,000 times 1.5. So let's say you're selling it to them at a 50% margin. So if I click enter, Roll's going to do the math for me, and then I'm going to go add project info. And the way that this shows, it's a little bit quirky, but it shows as a negative $500 cost. The reason for this is because a negative cost is a profit, and sure enough, my profitability has increased by $500 to about $9,200. And again, you just have to remember to invoice for that item. Now, the question that I typically get at this point is, do I have to create an invoice for every single separate expense item? And the answer to that is no. If you go into any existing invoice, or you can choose to create a blank invoice, you get the option to import your costs. So I can go import costs, and then I'd select all of the different expense items that I'd have. And then if I click add to invoice, it appears. So I just want to note that when it gets imported onto the invoice, your client will only see the sell price and not the buy price, which is exactly how you want it to work. So there you go. Now, while I'm on this topic, we've recently added integration with the Xero items library. So if you go into your Xero account, and then go into your dashboard, was that under business? Oh, it's under business, products and services. This is your items library here. So you can see that on this account, we've got a number of products and services that we offer. And that is being pulled through into your items library in Roll. There it is. So you just click that button there. And so all of the same items that you see in Xero will now be shown in Roll. And this can be used to quickly build invoices, quotes, and log costs. So if I go back into that cost section, instead of manually entering every single one of your expense items, what you can do, if it's a cataloged item, you can just click on this drop-down menu, select the expense item. Let's say it was some travel, and then all you have to do now is click the quantity and then click add. So it just speeds up the process, and it also makes sure that you're using consistent language across all of your different projects so that your clients are seeing the same thing over and over again, which is how you want it to work. Cool. Awesome. So that's cost tracking and time tracking for you. And so if you're doing more, so you now actually have the tools to invoice for your more ad hoc jobs, so your time and materials jobs. All you do is you'd create your project as per usual, log time, log costs as per usual. And then when it comes time to invoice, what you can do is you go to invoices, create invoice, create invoice. And this time you're going to get an invoice that's pre-populated only with the company name and project name. And you can see that the description line items are all blank. And you just go import time, and then select all of the time logs, and then import costs, select all of your expenses, and then you can go ahead and send the invoice off to your client. Pretty easy. Awesome. And the third thing that I want to cover off with you is quotes. So there's a couple of different ways that you can build quotes. Again, Roll's flexible as to which method that you use. So you can choose to go into the quotes and invoices tab and then create a quote from here. Or alternatively, you can go into your project and you've got the option to quote job from here. Pretty straightforward. The process is very similar to an invoice. And the appearance is very similar to an invoice too. So if you look at the quote, if you look at the quote, instead of saying invoice, it just says quote in the top left-hand corner. And then you've got the option to import your costs, and you've got the option to suck in your items from your products and services library in Xero. Cool. And then if you do choose to invoice out of, if you do choose to quote out of Roll, when you send your quote off to your client will receive something that looks a little bit like this, very similar to the invoices out of Roll in Xero, and your client gets the option to approve or decline the quote directly from the email that they receive. So it looks really nice and clean. Alrighty, and what we're off with you now is just the integration between Roll and Xero. First of all, to set up your integration with Xero, go into the settings area. And then you can see that at the moment, this particular account is Xero integrated, but if it wasn't, you'd have a button here that says authorize your Xero account. Just click that button, make sure you're already logged into your Xero account, and it's very easy to set up the integration. The next thing you want to do is import all of your Xero contacts. And so it's sucking all of the contacts and companies in Xero into your Roll account. And then you're pretty much ready to go. When you create so to talk about the invoice, give me just a second, I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. We should be fine now. Okay, there we go. Oh, no. That's all good. So to go into the invoicing integration in a bit more detail, so as soon as you create a draft invoice in Roll, you'll have a draft invoice be created in Xero that happens automatically and in real time. So if I go into invoices here, go into A and Z. Oh, not that one. That was the time and materials one. Here it is. So this was the first invoice that I created off of the progress payment. I can see that the invoice number here is 1074. Oh, let me go save and close. I can see that the invoice number here lines up perfectly. It's 1074. As soon as you click approve and send, and then you send off the invoice from Roll, your customer will receive the invoice from Roll. It looks a little bit like this, very similar to your Xero invoice. And then Roll will update the Xero invoice and mark it as sent. That happens automatically and in real time. Now, the beauty of Roll is that you have two-way integration between Roll and Xero. So what this means is that once your customer pays you and the bank reconciliation happens, the Xero invoice will get marked as paid, and then Xero will mark the Roll invoice as paid. Again, that happens automatically, but that's not real time. That happens once a day, and it's typically overnight. Usually not a big issue for our clients because bank reconciliations take overnight anyway, but it is something to be aware of. Anytime you go from Roll to Xero, that happens in real time. Xero back to Roll happens overnight. Cool. Awesome. And that is just about everything that I wanted to cover off today. Do we have anyone with questions? Okay. I can see someone has raised their hand. Give me just a second. Let me give you the mic, the virtual mic. Here you go. Amanda, are you asking a question? Possibly. No. Alrighty, I can message you after the webinar. But otherwise, that's everything from me. If this seems to be of interest for you and it seems like a good fit, what I'd recommend is to jump onto our Roll account, our Roll website, which is www.rollhq.com. And there's a big green button that says try now, and you can try a 14-day free trial of Roll. And I'll also be in touch with you for a more personalized one-on-one demo. Thanks everybody for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.